Today I am joined by Laurent Weichberger, and it is an honor and a privilege. He has meant a lot to me, and before I ever even met the guy, he really helped me a lot, and I'll kind of get into that. So without further ado, we'll just get right to it, and welcome, Laurent. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you, Ben?
All right, Jay Baba, very well. Thank you.
Jay Baba, happy to be here.
His latest book is Surrender, which we're going to talk about. And the first book I ever read by Laurent was a book he had, I believe, wasn't it you and Alan Cohen that had worked together on the A Mirage Will Never Quench Your Thirst book?
Yeah, I worked with Rick Chapman, Robert Dreyfuss, Alan Cohen, and Laura Smith on that. Yes, that's correct. And there's a whole story behind that, but that is the redo of God in a Pill that came out in the 1960s.
Right, that's right. Is that still available, God in a Pill, or is it mainly just kind of moved to this book?
It was replaced by this, and I can tell the whole story if anybody wants that.
Yeah, I'd love to hear it. Please share.
Okay, so what happened was it was about 1992 or 3. And I went to share your books because I had been given a magazine called Tricycle. You familiar with Tricycle Magazine? It's a Buddhist magazine.
Yes.
And this issue of Tricycle, the entire issue was dedicated to drug use and enlightenment. And I read this issue, and it was about 10 articles from different Buddhists, and they all had a different perspective, but it was everything from you should not use drugs in your search for enlightenment because Buddha said don't use intoxicants, and he would have meant drugs even though these drugs that they're using aren't from that time of Buddha, which was of course before Jesus. But all the way to the other end of the spectrum, which said, one article actually said, how can you call yourself a Buddhist seeking enlightenment if you're not using drugs to find enlightenment? So it's in everything in between the spectrum. And I read this magazine and I was horrified, and I thought, don't they know Baba's drug message? And they didn't, of course. So I looked in the back of the magazine, and all these Buddhist spiritual centers were listed in the back of the magazine, and I thought, I'm going to buy a whole bunch of God in a Pill, Baba's drug message, and send it with a letter explaining this to these centers and say, you have to educate your people about drugs aren't helpful and they're actually harmful physically, mentally, and spiritually, and Baba's, give them Baba's drug message. So I went to share your books. At that time, it was still the bookstore down in south part of Myrtle Beach. It wasn't the new beautiful bookstore that they have now. It was over in the Share Your Press building. And Ann Conlon, an old friend of mine from New York, was running that place, the bookstore. And I said, hey, Ann, how many copies have you got of God in a Pill? And she said, well, why do you need so many copies? And I said, well, and I told her this story about Tricycle. And she said, well, Laurent, I'm not comfortable selling you God in a Pill for that reason, for that project of yours. And I said, what? Ann, I'm not asking your opinion. I'm just trying to buy something from your store. And she was so funny. And she said, Laurent, that message, God in a Pill, is horribly outdated. It's from the 60s. It really needs to be redone and rewritten for a modern audience. She said, would you do that? Would you rewrite it? And I just looked at her and I said, no, but my heart said yes. And so she looked at me again. She said, would you just try? And she was my friend. And also I knew Baba was up to something because I heard that yes in my heart, even though I didn't want to do it. And I said, Ann, I don't know anything about that. And Baba's already picked out Robert Dreyfuss, Rick Chapman, and Alan Cohen. How can I do this? She said, just try. So I did. It took me years of research, and I wrote it, and I wrote to Alan and Rick and Robert, and they were incredibly supportive and loving, and they gave me material, and Alan Cohen flew out to Arizona and met with me about it. It was just an incredible time. They all wrote forwards for it. I worked with Laura Smith at Share Your Books. She edited it and added some more material to it. Anyway, it was just this incredible experience. By the time I got it finished, Anne just died, and she didn't get to see it. So when I had the finished manuscript, I went to Andy Lesnick at Share Your Books. He's the one who owns it with Sheila Krinsky. And I said to Andy, "Hey Andy, did you know Ann Conlon had asked me to rewrite God in a Pill?" And he said, "No, I didn't know that." I said, "Well, I did it. Here it is. If you're interested, let me know." And so he took it home, and we met at his house. He curled up on the couch with it and read it, and he said, "Yeah, we'll publish this." And he read one of the Baba quotes in there, where Baba says, "Drugs will never give you enlightenment or what you're seeking." You know, I'm paraphrasing, but the gist of it was, it's like a mirage that will never quench your thirst. And so Andy said, "That's the title of the book. A mirage will never quench your thirst." So we did it, and that's how the book came about.
I love it. Yeah, I had a bout with drugs. I was always in bands, and I actually grew up around a father who smoked marijuana right in front of me. It was back in the 70s. He had his marijuana tray right under his chair, and he'd pull it out and roll up joints and just smoke them right in front of me. And I grew up thinking that's completely normal.
Yeah.
And I just, Baba really saved me. That book really saved me. All those Baba quotes, that was huge for me. And I love the title, and the title says it all, really, because what Baba says is that, and I'm paraphrasing, but Baba says we're already in delusion already.
Yeah.
We're already living in delusion. So to do drugs is to go deeper into delusion. And that really hit me. And a lot of people don't know that marijuana is actually a hallucinogenic drug.
Okay. That's right.
I like, too, that, Baba knows all things. That took me a long time to really accept that, because that's hard to believe that anyone actually knows all things. And I do want to say that he says these things actually have uses, that they can help with depression and alcoholism. And I think I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, it's...
Yeah, Baba did say quite a bit about it. And so what I remember clearly is he said, when used for medical purposes, like we're talking about, either psychological addictions like alcoholism or other types of problems, or when used for other medical reasons under the supervision of a doctor, it's a completely different conversation than if you're just trying to use the drugs for what you can get out of them, Baba said. And I knew exactly what he meant. Recreational or escapism or some belief that you can attain enlightenment through using these drugs, which many people have beliefs like that. And I can tell you stories of conversations I've had with people. That's a different thing. And Baba made it abundantly clear that there's no shortcut to God through drugs. The only shortcut, he said, is by holding on to the feet of the master. So that's clear, right? So, and what we're finding out now is there are legitimate uses for many drugs under proper supervision. And Baba said that's not what he's talking about when he says no drugs. He's talking about the people who think that they can navigate that as some sort of spiritual path with drugs, and it's just not true.
I love it. That actually became such a hindrance for me too, thinking that I was entering into some spiritual dimension when I was doing drugs. I became dependent upon it for spirituality, and that was just until Baba came along, and putting that down was the most difficult thing I've probably ever done. Because it is the addictive nature of these things, and especially when you equate it to, you link it to things you love, like music and things like that. Because, man, when I was in bands, my friends and I just used to love to sit around and smoke a joint and play music. And it wasn't until my wife came along, actually, who's an incredible creative musician who can just enter the flow immediately and go for hours, she was a gift from Baba to me in that way, to prove that I didn't need it, and it took me a long time, and I'm still working on it even to get to I made that mistake of giving credit to the substance for what was already within me, which is what Baba points us back toward.
That's right, but millions of people make that mistake, so don't beat yourself up too much. It has to do with if you don't have direct spiritual experience, it's very easy to mistake drug experience for something spiritual when it's really not. And Baba would say, the thing is with spiritual experience, it's a lasting experience. And the drug experience, once the intoxication fades, you have nothing. There's nothing left. There's no enduring experience. And it reminds me of a very heated conversation I got into in Arizona when I published an article about ayahuasca, which is the new trend and fad. It's like the new LSD. And this fellow who I met with about it, he didn't like that I was saying, that it's a drug and you shouldn't use it and you can find spirituality within you. And he said he uses ayahuasca because when you use ayahuasca, you become enlightened. So I said, oh, that's very interesting. How many times have you done it? And he told me many times, and he plans on doing it again and all that. And I said, but if you got enlightened, why do you need to do it again? He didn't like that at all when I asked him that. So it's like a kind of fooling oneself. It's like wishful thinking. And it has to do with not really understanding the nature of enlightenment, if you can talk like that, right? And Baba made it very clear that true enlightenment brings with it infinite bliss, infinite knowledge, infinite power. It's not some temporary high. That's not what enlightenment is. Enlightenment is a permanent state of union with the beloved, and it doesn't fade. It has no ups and downs. It has only interminable sweetness. And that's something I know I don't have, and I know that if I did have it, I would know that I had it, right? So it's not something that is elusive. And I remember reading a translation of a Rumi poem once about the experience that Rumi had when Shams gave him self-realization. And the translation I read was, Rumi said, when I had that experience, I just kept saying to myself over and over again, this is nothing like I thought it would be.
I love it. I think it's such an important message for our world again. We had obviously a wave of it in the 60s with all that, and I know it never really went away, but it does seem with the legalization of marijuana, and I don't know, it just seems drugs are very, very common. I've got children. My older children have dealt with it. I would be surprised if there are any kids that don't get confronted with that pressure or that opportunity, and really what we really need in these times is a spiritual awakening, and it starts with us, So I'm really glad we talked about that.
Yeah, and I'll just put a little fine point on this. When I was writing that book, I did a ton of research, and I also researched some of my friends and family. And I asked at the time I was married to another woman, and I asked her brother, who was in high school at the time, I asked her brother, hey, how many of your friends in high school use drugs? And he looked at me and he said, I don't know any that don't use drugs.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was a big... For me, I was just going, oh, okay. Well, he wasn't counting the ones that use. He was trying to figure out if any of them didn't.
Yeah.
And Baba said, and I put this in the book, Baba said if the youth of America doesn't stop the drug use, he said soon half of the country will become deranged. And
I remember reading that. We may be there now.
I think we're there. I think that Baba's prediction has come to pass and that this country has become deranged. And I think we see it in the news. We see it in huge amounts of the country battling methamphetamine, battling heroin addiction, battling alcoholism, battling all kinds of craziness. And the marijuana becoming mainstream is deeply concerning to me. I don't think Baba would be happy about that at all. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. But we could do a whole session just on the drug issue, but
I'd like to come back to that sometime. Yeah, because and see what we can do to get that word out and Baba also says you need to be in the body, in the human form to have this enlightenment, right? This awakening, this realization of God.
He did say that. He did say that.
Yeah, and I think about drugs and how that relates to that too. So, and also to kind of segue from that too, drugs are pleasure seeking, which really is a form of lust. And I was, I want to bring up a story the other day. The other day I saw a beautiful woman and walking in front of me, and I was looking at her form and thinking how beautiful she was, and I heard Baba in my heart's ear, I guess, if you will, say, when you see something you want from another, when you see the form and you're attracted to that, you're actually trading the infinitely deep, beautiful soul that's standing before you, the God before you, for your own selfish desires and your lust. And that really changed my perspective on a lot, and gave me a lot of illumination on why Baba talks about to treat our brothers, treat our friends and all the people out there as brothers and sisters, and not to go around thinking about what can we get from them. And drugs, for me, they were just a very lustful, pleasure-seeking action, and what I really want is I want Baba, I want to hold
That's
on.
right.
Yeah.
And what you're talking about is a type of discipline. So Baba said many times to the Mandali, right? He said, look upon women as your sisters and your mothers. That was a great way of saying it. And of course, this is not a new problem, right? Lust is not a new problem. I'm reminded of a couple things. One is, naturally, I've traveled the world, and with Don and with my work, I've encountered many beautiful women. And I think there's a difference between appreciating beauty, the way you would appreciate a flower, a rose, a orchid, or any other kind of beautiful flower. And appreciation of beauty is not lust. It becomes lust when it's like Baba said, right? He said, love is wanting happiness for another. Lust is wanting happiness for oneself. So when it becomes taking that appreciation of beauty and turning it into what can I get from this to make me happy, that it turns into lust. And I remember my wife said something to me this summer, actually. We were at the beach, and there's tons of college girls and spring break girls and summer seekers, fun seekers. And she said, you don't look at the girls in their bikinis. And I said, yeah. I said, well, I have a beautiful wife. I love you, and I'm happy. And she said, well, I just wanted you to know that I'm aware of that. You're surrounded by all these beautiful half-naked women in these skimpy bikinis, and they have these perfect bodies, and you're not looking at them. And I thought, I know that's part of my discipline with Baba, and I could go up and down the beach and oogle them and appreciate them and even have that lustful thing, but that's not where I'm at in my process with Baba, right? So
that's beautiful. I love that, and I think too about when I first read. For a while, I struggled with Baba talking about the Mandali not looking at the women, and then here Baba goes and hangs out with all the women, and I love one thing about Baba that's really been challenging and very beneficial for me is how bold he is. He knows exactly who he is. He says, I can't be who I'm not. I can't tell you I'm not the avatar. I can't tell you, I'd be lying to you if I told you I was anything other than what I am. But I love how he challenges the ego so much. And when I had that experience, kind of realizing, hey, when I lust after someone, I'm missing them. I don't see them. I can't see. I'm blinded by my own ignorance. I realized why he did that for the Mandali. He was doing them a favor. It wasn't because he's egotistical and he wanted all the babes for himself.
Well, right. And to put even a finer point on that, I don't know if you remember the Manzili meme period, the House of M, that he had his first ashram in Mumbai. Do you remember that
I
period
do,
at all?
yeah. I read about a little bit about that. Yes, when he was kind of going through his kind of frightening, a little frightening for the people around him, maybe.
Yeah, he was training the men Mandali. It was only men Mandali. They were all very young. Baba was very young, and he had strict rules for the Manzili Meme. And one of the rules was no sexual activity for the men. And these are all young guys.
Hmm.
They were in their 20s. Baba was in his 20s, and or early 30s at that time. I think it was before 25, so he would have been in his 20s. Yeah, and so. One of the men got into some mischief, and Baba called all the men together, and Baba said, I've got these rules for you, and you've all agreed to obey my instructions. Did somebody break one of the rules? And there was silence and all that, and Baba said, I actually know more than you think I know. He was trying to be pretty mellow about it, but he just kept turning up the heat. And so eventually he said, one of the rules is not to have any sexual activity. Did any of you break that rule? Did you have sexual, activity? And eventually one of the guys just broke down and said, Baba, it was me, And Baba said, tell everybody what happened, at least be honest about it. And he said that when Baba went out with the men, he stayed back at the Manzili Meme, and one of the servant women who cleans the place came and they had sex. So Baba said, I'm glad that you were honest about it and that you confessed, and now pack up and go. You can't stay here anymore.
Oh,
and threw him.
That's so heartbreaking.
Yeah, but I mean, it was a training period, right? So the men knew what they were getting into, and so this guy had a moment of weakness, right? And at least he was able to confess it. And this is a case where Baba chose not to forgive. He punished him in a gentle way, but in a firm way, if that makes any sense, and said, based on what has happened here, you need to go.
Well, and it sounded like he maybe needed to hit home the seriousness of
Yes.
the work he was doing, and yeah, that's amazing.